Share my screen.
Hi, Phil.
Good morning or afternoon.
Afternoon, yeah.
Michael, do you see my screen?
I do, yes.
Okay, good. Hi, Philip.
Hello, Eva.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Am I the only one in an office?
Yeah, he's at our actual office.
Oh, there's no one here. It's perfect. It's my little getaway from being at home.
Nice.
I think Evgeny was saying he's on a in a porch in a cottage, so I think he wins.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the life.
Maybe I can give a little, report. Where am I? So.
That's great.
Oh, nice.
Do you see
Wonderful.
myself?
Yeah.
It's like this.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So all the stuff ready for a good rest. Good.
I wish I'm near the lake.
Something like this. Yeah.
Where are you? Whereabouts are you? Can't hear us. We'll just give a few more minutes for people to join in.
Yep. Akira, has there been any mention of people at H.H. Angus going back to the office anytime soon?
So, I mean, we have a small group of people in the office right now, just out of various forms of necessity, for admin or kind of managing the IT equipment or folks who, for whatever reason, really wanted to be in the office.
Yeah.
But it's probably less than 20 people per day, and everybody else is work from home. So for now, it seems that that's kind of the status. That'll be the status quo, and we'll see how things evolve, I guess, as the situation changes. But I think for the foreseeable future, this is kind of going to be how it is for now. Yeah.
Yeah, we get to talk to many different clients, architects, engineers, constructors. Majority are still working from home. Most of them are looking for, let's call it that hoteling situation when they return back to the office. If somebody has to go in for a day or for a meeting, you got to book your time ahead of time.
Exactly.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Certainly is.
Maybe we can start. And if there's a few stragglers, I'll admit them in.
Thank you. All right, welcome everybody for joining our first virtual MEP Manager Gathering. Welcome. So my name is Eva. I'm the Industry Account Manager for AEC at SolidCAD. So I've met some of you in person, and I'm looking forward to meet the rest of you today. And on behalf of SolidCAD, I would just like to introduce today's organizers And Akira Jones, he's the BIM leader from HH Angus. And obviously we have Michael Rotolo, our National Director here, and myself. And just some housekeepings. This is going to be recorded just so that for people who did not attend can review this later. And please mute yourselves if you're not speaking so we can avoid any background noises. And we encourage people to turn on their camera just so that we get a better interactions for this gathering. So normally, when I first joined SolidCAD, Michael invited me to an MEP gathering, and we ordered sandwiches and cookies and all that. But today we're doing it virtually, so please grab yourself a coffee or a nice drink. All right. And just going over the agenda. So we're going to have a welcome keynote from Michael, and some introductions for the panelists, and some self-introductions for the participants. And we're going to start off with the questions and answers. And at the end, we're going to have the closing remarks. So without further ado, Michael, please give us a welcome keynote.
Well, thank you. Welcome. So I just wanted to go back in time a little bit. This started off about 2 years ago in Toronto, and I worked with Akira and also part of TBIMC, which is the Toronto BIM community. And we decided to just have a small gathering of the top MEP BIM managers in that area. And we focused a bit more on the consultant side of things. I know there's MEP BIM managers for other industries, or I should say maybe other market segments, but it was a small group. And we were planning on running another session during this time, but obviously COVID had spoiled our plans a little bit. So we thought it would be wise that maybe we open this up, and now that we're all living in a virtual world that's now borderless, we'd open it up across Canada. I mean, there was a plan from SolidCAD standpoint to do something similar in Western and Eastern Canada, but let's take advantage of the times. And let's do this right now. So the last few meetings have been very interesting. We had our own people participating. So the MEP managers from the different consultants gave mini presentations on things like what kind of add-ons they're using for Revit, or how they're sharing and working on projects. And we always ask at the end of these meetings, what would you like to talk about next? And the last time it was all about, well, we want to speak to people outside of our little group here. We want to speak to contractors, to owners, to architects, to better understand how we can interact with them better, how we can work better, how they can work better, and we all come to a better resolution in the end. So that's what the whole point of today is. If we can go to the next slide, Eva.
Yeah.
So Akira and I and others have helped wrangle a few people for our panelists to be here today. So we have Philip from Modern Niagara, who's the mechanical contractor and electrical. I keep forgetting. I always think of modern as mechanical, but you have both. I apologize. We have Victor from Diamond Schmitt. There he is. And we have Yelena. I'm pronouncing that correctly. We haven't spoken before.
Yeah. Yelena, close enough.
Close enough. Yelena from University of Toronto, who is from the owner standpoint. So we asked you ahead of time to provide us a bunch of some questions. You did so. We appreciate those who did that. We're going to go through those questions, but as we go through, if you feel that you'd like to ask a question about some of the responses you're hearing back from the panelists, please go ahead, either put it on the chat or raise your hand. You should see in the middle of your screen a little palm, and we'll allow you to ask your question. If possible, please turn on your video camera so we can see your face as you're asking the question. That would be very much worthwhile. And I think with that, again, it's really an open forum. It's just that we're just chatting. There's nothing very formal about this. So with that, Eva, I think I'll pass it back to you, and maybe we'll start with the first question, and then we'll see where it goes.
Sure. So this is from, thank you, David Hoffman from MPE Engineering submitted the question. So we actually went over this with the panelists. Really, to sum it up is, how can we as consultant architect help the contractor step into the BIM world and starting using the tools available at all of our disposal and meet their needs?
If I could just add to that, and if you receive these questions ahead of time, what David was trying to put forward is that even though we're dealing with 3D models, we always end up with these 2D drawings that sometimes don't properly explain how things are laid out or to be installed. And also there seems to be some reluctancy from contractors when the project's under a certain amount to even start to use any type of technology to move us forward when we're dealing with this beautiful 3D information. So I'll stop from there. So Eva, who's our first panelist to take a crack at answering this question?
Is that Philip?
Yeah, I can start out. Yeah, so obviously what we do at Modern Niagara, anyway, just to give a bit of more background on me. I'm the National VDC Manager for Modern Niagara. We have 5 offices across Canada, and I have a regional manager in each location that's handling the local VDC teams. We recently created a national department though, so we're able to share resources and technology across the offices. And one of our mandates now is to do more and more manufacturing from the model. So our goal at Modern is to get projects that make sense to use the technology. We push to have that done, and as part of that, we are looking at the consultants and how we can kind of change that relationship or that dynamic. When we're on a design build project or we're on an IPD project, we're encouraging them to do less coordination work at the high level and focus more on the schematic. And because we end up getting their model if they have a model, and we end up modeling it again ourselves because typically the consultant doesn't know how we're going to manufacture it, how we're going to prefab it, how we're going to install it on site, what our foremen want to do on site. So we end up doing a second model, and that's just kind of the necessity. A lot of the problem too is we find the consultants are not modeling with families that would help in later on down the road. So we're starting to look at initiatives to have them model with larger fittings, like the welded fittings on piping, because if the welded fitting will fit in a space, you can use other fittings that take up less space. So all that being said, we're looking at ways to kind of streamline that process of the consultant drawings and getting that into the model where we can actually manufacture from the model.
Thank you. And so Victor,
Philip, there's a question. So are you asking engineers to do an LOD of 100 to 200 then, schematic for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at that idea right now. We find that there's somewhat of a wasted effort where the consultant is spending a lot of time trying to fit pipe into areas that really they don't know the final structure. They don't know where the rebar is in the concrete slabs. They don't know where the sleeve is, and so there's a lot of wasted effort, and we're trying to take some of that off their plate and also give us less work to do at the end of the day, because we're not looking at a coordinated model from the consultant that really isn't coordinated, so as far as how we're going to construct it. So we just feel like there's a bit of waste there. And another topic on that would be, we're looking at something like as simple as a hanger for a toilet or a carrier for a toilet. We're trying to encourage our consultants to use a family that we've created so they can place the carriers, and that gives the architect the actual wall thickness that they have between the two walls if they're back-to-back facing toilets. and also has a built-in sleeve location that properly locates where a sleeve would have to go at minimum away from that toilet based on our experience in building it. So if they already get ahead of the game by using some of these tools, some of that coordination effort is already taken care of in some cases.
There's a question from Akira. I know you typed it out, but maybe you want to talk about it, Akira?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, Philip, I completely agree with you in that in a streamlined BIM process, the consultants are focusing on the design, and so that's at the schematic level, and how everything works, and we rely on you guys, the fabricators, to make the model about how it's built. But what we're seeing in a lot of BIM execution plans, and especially when third-party BIM consultants are involved, particularly on some really large infrastructure builds, so like healthcare projects, P3 type design build stuff, we're seeing that the BIM consultants are building in this idea that the record model is the consultants or the design consultants models, right? Because they're lighter weight, they don't contain as much detail, and maybe that's not necessary for what the owner wants for the record model. So how would we reconcile something like that if we are in a process of for the consultants doing less modeling, more designing, and relying on the contractors to do the fabrication models and things like that?
Well, I think we would do the modeling using generic Revit, like you would be doing, up to a point. And then once we know that everything's coordinated and working in a spot and we're ready to actually manufacture it, then we would convert it to fabrication parts. And we would be able to then do that in-house and not have to basically redraw it over again because it's not in the right place. So the idea is let's get the 3D information in the right place, and then once it's coordinated, then you basically turn it into a fabrication model, but you already have that RFA content. So we're looking at ways to kind of mitigate it. We don't have the complete answer, but that's kind of what we're thinking. So that you start diagrammatically, and you don't spend a lot of time actually doing the 3D stuff. You let us coordinate it, because we'll basically get it closer to where it needs to be before we actually convert it to fabrication parts.
Gotcha.
There are some cases though, like for example, if we're coordinating it and you need it for issue drawings or something like that. So, there are cases where in reality you'll have a pipe on top of a pipe on top of a pipe, and in plan you'll never see that in diagrammatic fashion. So we're looking at ways to how to accomplish that as well, with extra drawings, maybe sections, 3D axonometric drawings for complicated areas, in order to satisfy the requirements of the issued drawings.
Victor, you've raised your hand. Comment?
Yeah, I think on the architectural part, I kind of agree with Philip's idea, like going a little bit down in regards to like elements that are not going to be reused at the end. But how would you see as like the coordination between the MEP and the architectural aspect, such as like you mentioned wall thicknesses and all those areas where we actually have the interaction with mechanical equipment, if those equipments are going to be on a lower LOD instance?
Well, the carriers would not be LOD. They're diagrammatic in a way, but they have all the relevant information on there. So they'll have markers where the sleeves are going. They'll have indicators or volumes that will show you where you can't put stuff. You can't put a sleeve in the middle of a steel column. So the idea is to use a diagrammatic family so that you have the correct wall placement and space between the walls for fabrication and installation, but you're not loading the model up with a bunch of useless information. It's basically families that you can put in there to help design with, and then when you're done with them, you can purge them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we've done an ROI where we basically showed how this one family could save $1 million on a project. Basically, just by all the coring and coordination and time involved of moving and issuing RFIs and SIs. You calculate it all up for every toilet in the whole building of a hospital, and you could save $1 million right there.
Yelena, you raised your hand?
Yes. So what I'm hearing is, we're talking about projects where you have a contractor on board early on, either as a part of the this integrated project delivery or a design build where the contractor is leading the show. We do have projects that are where you want to use the 3D or Revit or BIM or however you want to call it, when it's design, bid, build. So there is no contractor on board, and I think that goes into that together with that question. The drawings that are issued have to be coordinated, because otherwise it will lead to change orders and whatnot if they're not coordinated. The other thing is that, and I actually would appreciate if these either panelists or even or the participants can actually maybe shed some light around that. So before that, sorry, I have to just step aside a little bit to just maybe give my background a little bit and so that you understand where I'm coming from. So in my past life, before I switched to facility management, I was part of one of the leaders in the consulting company, one of the leaders, I think, in Toronto for sure, or in Canada. And this is where I got acquainted with, familiar with Revit and what it can do, both from the coordination perspective, visualization of the mechanical systems, as also to be used for some other softwares, right, to help with the HVAC, actually particularly it was with the CFD calculations and whatnot. Now we talk about, now I'm the facility management side, right? And this is where I'm trying to understand, and we at UofT now are really working towards understanding how can we use the Revit model or the outcome of projects that are done in the 3D, for day-to-day operations and for facility management. Now, one thing that I'm not that familiar with, and I know that I think we are asking for LOD to be like 300. Now, because of this opportunity to be part of this group, I have done a little bit of research to understand, okay, so what is this LOD? That I see people who are very versed in Revit and BIM are using fluently, and now, Philip, what you were just describing, that's actually what got me thinking. What I read is that it seems that there may be some misinterpretation or using LOD terminology when we want to use level of detail. So that people will ask for higher LODs while they actually want to use more details. So is that something that rings any bell with the panelists and the forum here? Is that something that we are trying to actually maybe use lower LODs but have higher level of detail, which is not LOD?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to refer it to like up to LOD 400 or up to LOD 350 or whatever, because there are some elements that will never be there. Right at that level, there will be stuff that you model at 300, and it'll be way more detail than LOD 300. So I think it's a bit convoluted in some ways, the LOD discussion, but as long as we know it's level of development and not level of detail. There are other terms out there. Haven't had them all written down, but there's level of development
Like I understood
Yeah.
level of development, LOD stands for level of development, but then they've been talking about level of details, and that may be something that, you know, Philip, when you talk about these washroom carriers and whatnot, you know, and so I'm just wondering how does this group get this out to the public? Because, you know, one of the questions here is like, how do we you know, how do we actually emphasize or spread the word or have this being utilized more broad? And I, like, again, from where I'm coming from, I'm thinking, you know what, because it should be used not only for the integrated projects and for BIM, it needs to be used on smaller scale projects. And now I'm quiet.
Akira, you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just in terms of, you know, not necessarily that I have some of the answers to the questions, but I mean, I would agree that, you know, in general, the idea of level of development, which is, I think, more like your ability to rely on the model in terms of what it is and what it will be in reality, versus the level of detail, or in other words, and some other ways to describe it, is a level of information in the model in terms of data that may relate to other things like design and you know, the engineering aspect to it. But I think what you touch on, Jelena, is that there isn't a consistent level of education in terms of BIM throughout the industry at the various levels. And I think we could see at kind of any stage, whether it's the consultants, the contractors, and the builders, and then the owners, there's a wide range of knowledge, understanding of BIM processes, even just the tools that are available, and things like that. But I think one of our biggest issues, you know, in Canada, is that we are kind of working at a ground up or a base up kind of format, where it's, you know, the practitioners that are using the tools and the processes, whereas there's no mandate from the top down, let's say from the municipalities or even higher levels of government, to have BIM standardized across you know, a province or even just a municipality. You know, we look at the City of Toronto, we're not even submitting digital documents for permits. I mean, it's, you know, PDFs with hand markup still, I think, with the City of Toronto, right? So, I mean, you know, I think what we'd want to work towards is hoping, or not hoping, but I mean, you know, pushing, you know, the various levels of government to produce some form of standard or minimum requirement for us to submit BIM models and produce BIM models from a regulatory standpoint. And then maybe it will force everyone to act in the same direction. But I think until that happens, it's going to continue to be a very varied landscape in terms of people's knowledge and abilities and things like that.
I have to just say, Akira, I don't think you have to go to the government to wait for that. I really think about who is using the BIM model. Why are you using BIM model? You're using for two things. You're using it to essentially enable easier transfer of information to the contractor, so that they can construct, right? And to, you know, minimize the coordination, minimize the gaps, or, you know, you're using for that. And then eventually it should be used for the owners. So, you know, I honestly don't even think, why would ever government, why would we sit and that, why would regulatory requirements mandate you have to use, you know, to submit 3D model to get the approvals or whatnot? You know, I think the owners are the ones that should be the primary focus on getting educated how to use the tool, because the owners are the one who put in the specifications and in the in the RFPs what kind of how should the documents be delivered and what are deliverables, and they're the ones that ultimately have to pay for that. So, you know, and that's more. And I'm not saying if there is a vision that eventually it becomes, you know, regulatory requirement, by all means, but this is something that in the short term, you know, education is the key. Not because I'm sitting in the education, but it's really. And
All
So,
right, I see David has his hand up. David?
Yeah, I think he just said that we were drifting away from the original question, and I agree.
Yeah, but I would like to comment
yeah.
on what Elena was saying, because I'd definitely agree with what she's saying as far as the confusion of LOD. And as a design consultant, what would make my life the easiest is if when I'm applying on an owner submitted or proposed request for proposal, is that they had the LOD defined, scope of LOD defined in there. Here's what your expectations. So all consultants are bidding apples to apples. When that doesn't happen, which is 9 times out of 10, when we submit our proposals, we submit our LOD listing of what. So for mechanical, our LOD 200 or 300 is going to be this. For electrical, it's going to be this. For structural, it's going to be this. So then undoubtedly, when you get into a job and people ask for more detail, we can at least say, well, you never asked for this. We told you what we're giving you. You want more, we're more than happy to do it, but here's what it's going to cost, because we keep driving a sinking ship where we just keep, when those project scope definitions aren't defined, and we just keep doing everything that everyone asks, and we're never going to make money just saying yes all the time. We have to cut a line somewhere.
Send an RFI. That's also what happens. You send an RFI and say, Mr. or Mrs. or owner, what LOD you want to have? Because I know that happens to us. And then,
oh, for sure,
we have
clients
you
right
LOD
now
300, I think.
Yeah, we have clients right now that know how to spell BIM, but they don't really know what it means, and so
I can guarantee
we
you
want
that
BIM.
majority of clients were like that.
Yeah, we want level 500. So it's the clients I work with closely. Yes, it's educating them and sharing with them our LOD letter so they can put it in their RFP. I don't care if other consultants see what we call 200 and 300. I'd rather just all us being looking at the same thing. So.
Yeah, and just adding to David, this is exactly what we've been seeing lately on other RFPs that we receive. Mostly of them, like the owner just say we require BIM, but it's a very vague statement on, but what part of BIM are you requiring? Are you asking for extraction, operation and maintenance facilities requirements? So it's like all the time, I think Elena actually got into a point which is mostly educating the owner to understand what you're asking. So it makes everyone's life easier, not only on the trade side, but also on the consultant side, because we all know what we're going to be delivering at the end.
All right, so I saw Tim's hand up, put his hand up.
And George as well, yeah.
And George as well. Tim, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I can go on then. I was going to avoid it, but I figure if you're going to call me out. Do you not think that we are seriously stuck behind proposal estimating costs? Because right now you offer somebody 200 at a certain fee and someone else will offer them 200 at a slightly lower fee, but they'll actually give them something a little closer to 150. And we're getting outbid because we're the higher cost, but we're offering what people people who don't have the same experience with what LOD actually means, they're happily taking the lower cost for what they claim to be identical LOD, and then later it gets tossed out by contractors because it doesn't have enough development to actually work for construction.
Yeah, and I think on that part, that's exactly why we need to understand, like we need to make sure that everyone understands which level we are expecting from the bidders. So what Elena and Philip said before, having that as an explicit on the RFPs or when we are bidding the document, that's the information that we are missing. Because a lot of times they just say LOD, sometimes they even provide the LOD matrix that they are asking for, but they don't say what the 200 means for them. They're missing what their idea of LOD 200, where they're taking that information from is. So at the end, it exactly happens what you said. Like everyone says they're going to be delivering 200, but at the end, it's not really 200, and the coordination process starts getting a little bit behind. And when it starts getting to the contractor, we see that.
But it started to make us seem expensive because we're actually giving the LOD 300 we say we're going to give, but that takes time and money, whereas everyone else is giving an LOD 300 that isn't, and they're charging less.
And this is where that's why and I'm sorry, I think we should listen to George first before I.
Yes, please. George, you have your hand up.
Hi, thanks. Just a quick introduction. I'm George, work for Integral Group in Vancouver. But I was just going to go back to sort of the client requirements and education around it. I think BIM's still kind of a buzzword that people are just asking for, and then you kind of hear things like digital twins and everything in RFPs and contracts. But you know, there's no sort of employees information requirements that come in for it. You know, we're not actually understanding what the client wants. It's just facility management, but it's not really in a format that we understand or know how to deliver it. I think from what I've seen, there's no kind of BIM management standards and procedures coming from the client side, sort of really explaining what they're after and what they're looking for. Is it simply just a 3D model at the end? Is it actually all the facility data and information in either OmniClass, Kobe, whatever they want to deliver? And I think it's just, yeah, a lot of miseducation going on down at the client side, and then we're kind of getting it at the consultant side, guessing at what you're after, and then kind of delivering it not to a standard that you want, and then no one's really happy with what's been delivered. And then sort of on the contracting side, I've seen, you know, there's been a big push of contractors using BIM software and getting into the models, but generally the stuff that we produce is more design intent, and, you know, going back to the LOD, it's just up to LOD 300, and it's like, look, this is kind of what we want to plan and design, build, and you know, a lot of the stuff that we do just gets chucked out and remodeled and done at the contracting side. I think it's just more us getting a robust model on the consulting side and developing that and building it up so the contractors can use it. But going through to fees, we haven't got the fees to do that. We're just chucking these models out, getting it done, and it's on to the next project. But yeah, that's kind of sort of what I was just wanted to jump in and say, that kind of skipped on quite a few points. But yeah, I think going back to the client side, it's just educating around there and actually road mapping your requirements and getting it thorough so we really know what you're after and what you're looking for.
So I'm just going to add something to it, because this is really and so, you know, this is not the questions are, you know, around this BIM and whatnot, and you know, how do we ensure that everybody is on the same level? I just want to share with this group, this is really not about BIM only. This happens, and like even if the BIM is not involved, right? You know, when the owner puts the RFP out and asks for certain design, and you know, you can spell out what you want to do, there is always room for interpretation, and there will always be room for interpretation, right? Because, you know, you will see, you know, I see responses from various different companies, and they read the RFP and they think, you know, they interpret certain way what should be provided. It happens in the commissioning industry. You know, I have been here for 3.5 years. You know, for the commissioning, we are very specific. 3 years ago, we have written that we are expecting commissioning agent to be the one who writes the system narrative. So they are the ones who actually take the design basis memorandum. They are the ones who work with the contractors to understand, you know, how actually the system starts, stop, and what not will be done. And we have spelled it out. We think we spelled it out. We are still in the process of working with commissioning agents in the end to say, guys, you have to write this. And this is, you know, and because people are not used to. So, and also because, so if you don't know, you don't know. And I think that's what I want to tell to this group is that the phase that you are going through is happening also in the other levels. It's not just 3D. It can, you know, and because you can really never spell it out in such manner that there is never room for interpretation, and that, you know, team, you may, you know, your owner may end up with the company that you feel, well, they're giving the less service, right, than for exact or more money or whatnot. Now, I really think what I'm hearing is, like, I really think it's time that again, going back to that, educating the owner. You guys have seen the RFPs that are coming from the various clients. As Philip mentioned, as a contractor, he has also worked with the consultants. Why doesn't this group then come up with some sort of a standard? Or looking at all this and saying, okay, you know what, let's come up with some, standard guidelines. It doesn't have to be a standard, but some document that can be used as a basis for further dialogue and for the education. That's what because that's the only way to move forward. Because the other thing that is with the owners, and I can tell you that's on the operation side, so the operation group for facilities and services group is the group that should be using on the owner side this model and whatnot. There is usually very limited number of resources. There are other things that are absolutely more urgent, or they are perceived as more urgent, where the money will be allocated for. So even so getting the resource that will be just to work with the 3D model with the information, it's difficult. So also the projects that are handed over, done in 2D world, are still yet to be handed over in a manner to allow time for facilities and services to actually focus on anything but putting down the fires. So I'm just sharing this so that you understand where the owner is coming from. So I can tell you that it would be. I know that when we were writing and we were working with our with the architects who are in the planning department of University of Toronto, because we are asking for 3D model for everything. We have the infrastructure project, which is strictly infrastructure, mechanical, heating and chilled water modification in the existing building. We have asked for BIM. We did have to work with our consultant to figure out, okay, what verbiage should we put in? Like, what actually do we want? Because I don't know what I don't know, right?
All right, so I think we should move on to the next question. So this is coming from Tim. So basically his questions, it's now displayed, and it's revolving around with technology now working with the new normal. Is the new normal going to be the catalyst for change, seeing experienced professionals learn new methods and make space for less experienced technology-focused young professionals?
Well, I think we've seen a lot of change recently in our organization. We used to have a lot more face-to-face time, the VDC department, more face-to-face time with our field teams. And with some of the new tools that we have available, we're a heavy user of Procore, so we're publishing models up to Procore's BIM viewer, and those are getting out to tablets to the guys in the field. They're able to call up the model. They're able to query information off the model, similar to other tools like Revisto and things like that. So that's kind of forcing the hand a little bit in that direction. That being said, though, we do value a lot of face-to-face time with our field team, because they're the ones that are our customers, really. So, we kind of have to adapt to how they are used to working in some ways. We're not trying to force new technology on them, but there are some that adopt it faster and easier than others, and some get it really quickly and think it's a great thing. And we have there's a similar firm to ours in the States, and their VDC team doesn't go to the field at all. So it's something to kind of look forward to, trying to get better absorption of the technology in the field. And certainly it's easier in some cases than others. And not necessarily the young. It's interesting because you think that the guys out of school are going to be the ones that really pick this up, and in some cases they aren't. Sometimes it's the older guy that has never really seen the benefit before, and all of a sudden they see the benefit and they're like, wow, this is awesome. So
Victor,
Yeah,
I know you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really good point, Philip. It's mostly, I think this new norm is actually helping us to show people the advantage of using all those technologies, so like Revisto, having all the issue markups and 3D visualization, not only in your computer, but all the other platforms that we have, like iPads or on your cell phone. And a lot of times people before, even on the older people there is involved on the design process, they don't actually have had the experience, so they don't know about those technologies. And when we actually start showing them this is now available for you to use, they start changing a little bit their mentality and embracing those technologies and start to use that for an overall design perspective, especially because, as you said, we don't actually have the face-to-face. And a lot of times with this new normal, we are having swamped of meetings and everything becomes a meeting. So actually having the time to not need to be on the meeting itself, but still have the collaboration with everyone at the same time, that's a really important process that I see as this new normal bringing to the overall AEC industry itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, Victor, I think you're touching on even question 2 and question 3, where, there's now more than ever that people need to rely on technology. And just going to the third question, do we risk being left behind by not adapting to these new methods and professionals like the rest of the AEC industry?
Well, I think it is one of those situations where you are going to be forced to adapt because it's kind of the new norm. So, if you refuse to meet on virtual meetings, if you refuse to look at digital photo that somebody's taken of the site, rather than going out into your car and possibly having to go through a lot of gymnastics or hoops to get onto the site for health and safety reasons, then you're going to be left behind. I mean, I think that it's kind of, it's almost what's happening in the States. I don't need to wear a mask. I don't need to go on a virtual meeting. I don't need to do that. Well, you're going to become infected and get sick and not be participating if you don't adapt. So I think it's just going to push the technology forward even more, because people are going to also say, wow, I love this. Can you do this with it? And it may be like, well, no, you can't, but let's talk to the developer of the software and maybe they can add that feature, so.
I see Akira has her hand up.
Yeah, in terms of the third question, Tim, I just wanted to ask you, when you say we being left behind, are you speaking specifically about consultants?
I mean the MEP consultant.
Right. Yeah.
As I've noticed, it seems to be that construction, engineering, structural engineering, architecture, interior designs, even sprinkler engineers are well ahead of mechanical.
Why? And from your perspective, why do you think that is? I'm curious.
Why do I think mechanical is behind, or why do I think they're ahead?
Well,
I don't know.
I
tried to touch on it. If you read the synopsis, I tried to lead into I can say it plainly that it seems to be this dedication to experience is the captain of mechanical engineering. If you're over 55, you are seen as an authority and whatever you say goes. And those over 55s that aren't willing to embrace something like Revit technology or BIM in general is holding the entire industry back. No change will happen until those plus 55s make a change. No offense to the plus 55s in the group.
Well, some of us may not be 55.
Are you saying that I should ask for a raise when I turn 55?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't think it's like it's really not about 55 or not 55 or 20 or 30. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think that's what's holding.
Okay, that willingness to embrace technological change.
Yeah.
Wherever you put that marker in the sand,
yeah,
it seems to be those that are unwilling are still heralded as authorities, and those that are willing are not.
But I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, this is really what I'm not sure is when you ask this question, like, what are you actually trying to ask? Because you know, you will always have, like, there will always be people that are against change, any kind of change, in every organization, any kind of change, right? So
change management is a big component.
yes,
and we have a whole group in our firm that deals with nothing but change management, because we're going through a lot of changes at Modern Niagara right now. We're changing the way we manufacture things. We're changing the way we do VDC and model. You know, the way we integrate with our field. You know, we're changing a lot of things. So change management is a huge component of that. Yeah.
And you know what, I just have to say, because Philip, this is excellent what you're, I mean, what you're saying, and something that resonates with me, you know, and it is hard, because you have to think about how to influence essentially without authority. But that is something that everybody, if you really want to be the change you want to see, to cite Gandhi, because that's, if you want to be the change you want to see, and you have to learn how to influence without authority, and which is very hard, because I know I'm going through that. You know, when I want to ask, let's say, for extra resource, I always start with, you know what, we lack this, we don't do this, we don't do that. Instead of making it a spin and say this will be better, this, you know, or like, not to start with going right to the lack of this, you know. So I think that's you know, change management is actually, it is skill. It is something that you know, one needs to read about, so to be able to do it. It's not just common sense or natural. Like common sense is what I'm hearing here. Everybody's just complaining about the owners or the contractors, or not being understood, or, you know, young versus old.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what the consultants do. We just complain about everybody else.
You know,
that's what we're good at. Philip, I did have a question for you. You know, just touching on the change management, I find that really interesting. You know, at Modern, what was it that triggered the drive for advancement of technology? Is it something that's always part of Modern Niagara's kind of mission, or was there a catalyst? Was it like understanding that there could be potential cost savings or efficiency gains? And then I guess a second part to that is, how do you manage the resistance to change at Modern? Like, there must be elements within the company that were resistors to kind of embracing new technology. So how did you go about, you know, proving the value of embracing the technology?
Okay. Yeah, first, there's no resistance. I'm just kidding. There's a lot of resistance all the time. Well, a couple of years ago, a department at Modern Niagara did not exist, and it exists now. It's called Construction Services. And as part of that group, BDC, I fall under that umbrella, and our goal is to find ways to save money, find ways to make things more efficient, find ways to be better at what we do. And it's one of the mandates, right, of one of our core values, is to be the best at what we can do. And a lot of that comes with just taking a look at processes and disconnects, and always looking out at the horizon to see what's better. You know, we may be drawing with Revit today, but maybe there's something else better down the road that blows it out of the water. So we have to be prepared to adapt and change. And so our group is always doing the R&D and ROIs on that, and finding ways to do things better. And part of the change in the VDC department was, you know, we had 5 offices doing their own thing, and they were doing it well. But if I wanted to have somebody in Vancouver work on a project in Ottawa and send it to a shop in Calgary and have it manufactured exactly the same as we would anywhere else, we had to change something. So, you know, we switched over to doing using a different platform, because we saw value in being able to track where we were in any piece of pipe or sheet metal ductwork, we could track wherever that was in production and get feedback on that in real time. And we also looked at shop efficiencies, doing things inside the shop versus out in the field. So we were always doing tests, in some cases we'll take a project, a fairly simple project, but we'll break it up by floor. So there might be like 2 floors that are very similar, and we'll do one prefab and the other one we'll have a team stick build it on site. And then we'll do analysis of that and come back and say, look, we're spending way less time here. We're doing a better job by doing prefab. We have a quality controlled environment in the shop. We can check all of our welds. We're not up on a scissor lift, that kind of thing. So there's lots of ways to measure it and get that kind of aha moment, like, okay, we're going to save $2 million over the next 2 years just by doing this simple thing. So looking at inefficiencies and finding ways to better mitigate those. And then your second question, part of your question, was to mitigate change. Yeah, I mean, there's always a detractor, and in some cases it is where you have to kind of show by example. So you might have a labor manager that says, well, I've always done pipe this way. I've always just, cut it out on site and blah, 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 this and that. And they don't see the advantage of it. But then you pit them against each other, another team on the same project, and they see the advantage of it. It's kind of shown to them. Then their eyes are kind of opened. But, you do have to have buy-in. And in some cases, people get rolled over and they get left behind, and that's just it's a sad statistic, but it does happen. So if they get left behind, then sometimes they say, "Oh yeah, you know what, you were right." So, I mean, it depends, I guess.
I mean, like, look at COVID, right? It's the situation that forces you to change. Yep. I see David has their hand up. David?
Yeah, just I guess continuing on that and kind of maybe back to Tim's original question is what I believe was, back to the 55ers plus or whatever that line in the sand was. Just a personal experience we've dealt with here in the last 6 months. So our consulting firm, we have civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, and process departments. So we're full multidiscipline. And we've been using Civil 3D and Revit and Plant 3D to a certain level of success on certain jobs. Still a lot of people holding back. What we've found has really helped is we've taken the full electrical group, all 20 people, designers, techs, engineers, construction guys, put them all in the room with our BIM, our Revit guys, and saying, okay, we're going through a Revit project right now, start to finish. How we start the job all the way to level 500 if we want, and showing the benefits of what that software can do to everyone in the group. Now we poke holes in how that user's doing it, but it's also opening the eyes. You can see the wheels turning in some of our senior management going, holy cow, you can do that. If I invest a bit of time in that, you guys can flush that out. So we're seeing in the last 6 months, we've been doing that with all of our groups, and we're seeing a lot more buy-in from people. They understand there's upfront time to get those families working, the way we want, but they're now seeing the benefit because they're actively engaged in that process with us. But it's forcing lunch and learns on them and whatnot. And I'm hoping to evolve that into something similar with our clients as we move forward, not on that detail level, but let's show them how BIM can help them, and likewise with the contractors in my area is one
just
thing.
Like Phil was saying, right? Time and money are the biggest motivation for change.
Yeah, and I think on that sense, especially on the architectural side, I'm seeing a lot more exactly what David says. Like, you actually have to do to prove it, and start getting like a project examples. So you start from scratch and show to the management team that sees like this is creating like a lessons learned process that actually gathers the information, so you have a support data to see like this is the best way to move forward. That has helped us a lot to get things moving smoothly on that sense and bringing technology to the company.
All right. So moving along, this is Tim's second question. It's also about the LOD and 100. I think we briefly went through it. So let's move along to Ivanji from Crossy Engineering. So he has a question for the contractor. So what is considered as good consulting model, and what are typical issues in a bad consulting model?
Well, from our perspective, a good consulting model has the relevant information to have us size the pipe properly, size the duct properly, have the right equipment there, but also allows for flexibility. So in a lot of cases, we find better ways of doing things because we know how we're going to build it. So a lot of our time is spent not necessarily correcting mistakes, but we do come across them. You know, it's part of our job to correct those as we come across them and report those back. But is also knowing how we're going to install it and build it. So, you know, we may have insight on how we're going to have less fittings to do the same thing as 3 fittings. You know, we might have one fitting upstream on a pipe that does the same thing as 3 downstream. So, and then routing, you know, looking for efficiencies. We always tell our designers never circle back on a routing unless you have to go around something, but always keep the molecules going away from the equipment. So if you have an air molecule going away from a duct, don't send it back towards the duct or towards the equipment. So I think a good consulting model has that. A bad consulting model, I think, is just trying to fully coordinate it. Like I said earlier, fully coordinating something that really is not going to be how we're going to install it and model it. You know, there's a lot of wasted time and energy there that could possibly be spent doing a better design, or you know, I don't know how that could be done, but you know, think about or talk to your contractor if you're on a team with a contractor, if it's not just a tendered project, and talk to them and let's start the communication earlier in the project if we can. We're doing something similar with a firm out west. We're looking at ways to where we do most of the modeling and they do most of the design, and we're going to try it out. We haven't done it yet, but we're going to look at how we can make that happen. And so that's kind of what I would say. And like I said earlier too, model with welded on pipe, you know, because it's going to be the biggest fitting. We know it's going to fit if you coordinate it and it fits in a space. We know we're not going to run into problems if we have a smaller type fitting. So I think that might need to go upstream to Autodesk and say, hey, you know, let's look at your generic Revit and let's make the generic Revit work for all fittings. You know, start with the big one, and if everybody's modeling with the big ones, then we're not going to have any trouble if we have threaded pipe or Vitalik or whatever. So that would be one way to start.
Okay, thanks, Philip. And the question for owner: what data would you like to see transferred from a Revit MEP design model to a digital building operating system? Yelena?
I think we sort of had that discussion, or maybe some answers were already provided earlier. So I think, again, my answers are now based on what I know, right? So, and actually what I learned when we had a pre-meeting. So that's why I think it's really, really critical that that there is some education for the owners, you know, and sort of like a list of things that you can go through to pick and choose what you want, so that, because one size does not fit all, right? Now, from where University of Toronto is facilities and services, and I'm, you know, speaking from like what we would like to have when the Revit model is completed, the construction one, right, is that we have some database with all the equipment schedules, so that it can be used. It can be used for the commissioning as well. That we can use it for the asset management, right? So that we can maybe connect that with the computer's maintenance management software, and so that that information can be transferred like that. What also would be nice is if we can get some block load calculations, or like how the airflow is calculated, or how the water, if that's used during design, like if that information can be transferred to the owner. Now, one thing I actually have like a contra question. We are now in the process of trying to understand how to do the virtual tours of our mechanical rooms. Now, I'm not talking from the construction perspective. I'm talking from the perspective of, like maybe something, if people are familiar with Matterport. Matterport has that. Now, it doesn't have to be Matterport. We are now trying to explore maybe to use 3D Vista software for that, where you can essentially like a Google, but in the mechanical room, where you can walk through the mechanical room and see the equipment. So if this is something that we can get with a Revit model, so that we can have those virtual tours, but more user-friendly, like Google is more user-friendly than like right now. For example, when I get the Revit models or Navisworks models, just to view, to see where we are, you really have to be, it seems like you have to be fairly versed with video gaming in order to be, to feel confident and comfortable while you're going through the space. It's really like, I know that every time I do that, I'm like, shoot, I have to practice this with my son or with my daughter, to that matter, because they are like so quick, or maybe I just have to play more of those shooting games so that I can be, like I can walk and look up at the same time, not walk and then look up and then do whatever. So that's, anyhow, that's like, I can't give you the list of desired parameters, but that's essentially where we are.
So Tim, you have a question?
Just to the end of trying to navigate your way through those point clouds, I recommend ClearEdge 3D. I'm not a salesperson, just by the way.
ClearEdge 3D. Okay, we are now in the testing ground, because this is like, we also have to find a way to sell this so that people can use it, and then you can do more, right? So that's part of that change, like one step at a time, because if you try to tackle everything, good luck.
George, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so everything that Jelaine just said there, that's exactly what I kind of want to hear from a client and an owner. Is just stating your employees' information requirements. You're saying you want your asset information, you want your project information, and all your organizational information. So that's something that then we could work with to actually develop a standard and procedure to deliver that information for you. But what we tend to see on our side is just, I want a BIM project, and then they don't actually state that information that you just said. So then we're kind of left guessing, and then someone else will come in halfway through a project and start asking for this asset information. It's far too late to develop that now.
And I have to tell you, again, it's not because the owners do not want. It's they don't know. They don't really know. And because many of the owners, they like, I am in a little bit of better position than some other owners, is because where I came through to be in this position, right? So I know many of the owners don't, because they are coming from, they have never been in design world, or in the construction world. They may have been just the operators and doing something which is really different, or property managers. It's different.
Yeah.
So that's why, you know, as I said, like I really appreciate this forum and this group, and I think we can do something that will be beneficial for consultants, for contractors, and for the owners, and for this whole industry. Because as an engineer, I have to tell you, it's very painful when I sit on this side and you can hear, and I know how much work is done by consultants. I know how much work is done by contractors. I know how hard it is to be a contractor. Honestly, like, you know, with all due respect to the consultants, it is really hard, like, for contractor to now, you know, take all these plans and build something. And then you have these operators that have to do the maintenance, and they have to crawl underneath the ducts and then walk on the windowsill. And I've done it with my guys, you know, underneath, walk on the windowsill so that you can get to the access door to the air handling unit, so that you can see why this cooling drain is not draining. So, and then you have this, and then you have clients, my clients, who are so unhappy with everybody. So that's my personal mission, is like, you know, let's bridge this gap, and all you can do is we have to educate and spend effort there and time.
Akira?
Jelena, I have a question for you on the owner side, and maybe because you touched on it, you know, thinking about the operators, and the operators spend so much time living with whatever is designed and created. But in terms of the technology that's available on the operations side, are you seeing similar kinds of pushes for innovation and the use of technology to you know, make facility management more efficient? I mean, are you seeing things coming in terms of using, let's say, going from a preventative type maintenance to a more predictive maintenance, like that kind of push? Or is there a similar kind of, do you find resistance?
Absolutely, okay. Absolutely. The thing, however, when you say resistance, you know, you will have always the senior leadership. You will have the ground, or the people on the floor, right, who actually have to live through that experience I just explained. You know, so when somebody complains and you have to go, and you know, you cannot respond in 30 minutes. It takes you 2 hours to actually to respond. But there is absolutely, but what I'm saying is that in order not to lose the momentum and to really make the change, it's the time now. The how to say, the approach has to be focused, and you know, so and then we stand a chance. And you know, I mean, as I said, I've been here 3.5 years. Just the fact that I'm now sitting at this forum means that something is happening, you know. And as I said, you know, the fact that we are exploring now how to come up with those virtual tools of the mechanical rooms, and you know, of course, when you build the model in Revit, yes, it's not going to have images, right? That's the difference between the Google, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the difference. The Google, you know, you actually see the real stuff, and if you would use the BIM, it would be what is drawn, but still would give us the same ability to walk through that space, and you know, to use that now for the training of the building operators.
Yeah, you should look at openspace.ai. I was thinking about what it was, and I came across the site again. It's really for construction, but you basically can put a 360 camera on a hard hat, walk through your space. It'll do 360 video, and it'll know exactly where it is on the plan after it's processed. And you can do a side-by-side of the BIM as well, and do. I don't think they can do an overlay yet, but you should look it up. It's probably what you're looking for, and it's a lot like
OpenSpace.ai.
AI.
Yeah.
.ai.
And
yes.
Victor? And Victor?
I actually know a couple Autodesk people that left Autodesk to go work for OpenSpace AI because they want to also integrate all that into BIM 360 as well. So it's a growing company. It's a good product.
Yeah, I think it's probably what would fit the bill for what Elena's looking for.
Yeah, and I think just adding up on everyone's opinion, it's mostly what I'm seeing is the part that we are kind of like lacking the knowledge or the education that's on the owner side. So I think if we can start getting like on the SolidCAD side or the TBMC area to start bringing the owners into the BIM part, explaining them what BIM is. So I think on that way we can start getting the whole community understanding of how we can improve the process and make sure that we can start applying those elements to it. Like on the contractor side, I think we've developed a lot since I'll probably say 5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, we didn't actually have a lot of contractors using the BIM methodology or using BIM for construction and fabrication. I started seeing this as a process that it's happening, and you start getting more and more contractors and trades actually using Revit and having the coordination and the collaboration on that sense. But I think we are now lacking on the owner side. Start bringing the owner to our side as well, so we can start sharing with them about the advantages and what they can take out of BIM to help them facilitate their facilities and the buildings that they're getting.
All right, so thank you for all the feedback. So moving along from questions from XJ Jengus, I think we've actually touched on a little bit of each question. It's basically more around on the expectations of the MEP consultants around BIM, and also how are you using the BIM on your site, and where do you see the use in the future? How has the current situation influenced your thinking on the BIM use?
I think this was a question for the owner from the Changus.
Yeah.
It is, but I would say that my second question is something that I'm always very curious about. The first question, the expectations is from the architect and your MEP consultants, because I find that there are a wide range of expectations. And so, Victor, in terms of what your expectations are from the MEP, like from us as a consultant, and I'm sure a lot of the folks on the call could agree, maybe to put more detail into it, I think there are certain things that have traditionally been of the scope of the architect versus the scope of the MEP consultant, and the lines with BIM are now blurred, right? And I can give a concrete example. Anything to do with ceiling coordination or wall elevations, receptacles, switches, and this kind of stuff. So, how, from your perspective, where do the responsibilities lie, and how do we navigate, where we may have conflict in terms of, whose responsibility these kinds of elements are, or what's your experience in terms of managing the MEP consultants in that sense?
I think I would start the ideal world would be whoever has to be putting the element on their model or connecting instances to the elements, that would be the discipline that would carry it over on the model, so we don't actually have duplications on that sense. So as an example, the lighting fixtures would still be carried over within the electrical models and so on and so forth. But we do understand that the coordination process, because of the architectural changes happening within the rooms, makes complex and sometimes even constant changes on that sense. A lot of duplication happens, and we're just not efficiently coordinating on that sense. So I would probably say the expectations is to not have double modeling itself. So electrical will carry it over lighting fixtures, and mechanical will carry it over like fire hose cabinets and so on and so forth. Those are the main ones that I actually see as like a big coordination part that we always discuss during the kickoff meetings, to understand how we're going to be tackling the workflow, if it's going to be a duplication, or if the consultant actually agrees to be making the changes in their own models, and how we can actually deliver the changes, and how we can demonstrate the changes to the consultant. But the ideal world, it would be each person would be responsible to their elements on the models itself, and we wouldn't have any duplications on that sense.
All right. Philip or Yelena, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we've discussed a lot of that already.
Okay. All right. So let's move
yes.
along. So these are some of the general questions that we came up. So what info does the owner really need?
Yeah, I feel really very honored that I'm representing the owners of the world.
Careful what you say. It could change everything for everybody.
Exactly. I think I have already touched this in the previous discussion. What info does the owner really need? And again, you know, I'm going from that where I stand right now and what I know, and you know, from again also being in the facility management side of the industry for the past now 8.5 years. It's getting there. You know, both on the manager of engineering side and also now, you know, overseeing the operations on the St. George campus. So it's really, sorry, I really have, hopefully there's no emergency because I'm just bear me for a second. Where I was going with this is that, you know, as I said before, the information, the schedule information, equipment schedule information that will allow asset management afterwards, commissioning as well, and then, you know, any calculations, because I know that at University of Toronto we ask for that on some projects, and because we don't have the official deliverable document yet that is posted on the website, so we just attach that from time to time. You know, we do want to see the block load calculations. We want, if we can get the airflow calculations and the water calculations, that would be even better, because that helps with troubleshooting as well as with the future projects. So that's what we would like to. That's from the owner perspective.
And that kind of ties into our third question. Does the owner need the COBie spreadsheet from the model with all the back-end calculations?
And that's, you know, again, because of, I have to admit, like this COBie terminology I heard from Philip 5 days ago, and I did a little bit of research, so you know, and yeah. So I think I would say we do need some kind of spreadsheet. Now, what exactly? I think that's something that, like, to what level? This is something that, as the owner, I would have to actually understand more, so that we can. I don't know if this is one size fits all, or
maybe
this is something.
I don't think it is. I think it's project specific, because certain projects will need more information than others.
Yeah, it's
and
not
obviously, if somebody says I want COBie information, you need to walk them through it and understand what exactly are you trying to get out of the information. You know, I think that leads to the first question. You know, what info do you actually really need to use at the end of the day?
Michael?
Yeah, just to ask a question along that, maybe to Phil specifically, what percentage of your projects is COBie being asked for you to provide that information?
Right now, one, but we know more are coming. Okay. We're doing one. We're doing one in Calgary right now, and you know, we'll see what the cost is at the end of the day. But you know, our projections are just the sheer amount of time it's going to have to put all of that in there. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, and it's one of those things that's kind of it is kind of new to a lot of people. So it's a bit of an unknown. So we have to price it that way, you know. So we make sure we put a bit of a fudge factor on there to make sure that we aren't caught with our pants down, so to speak, and paying out of our pocket to get it done. So yeah, it's something that we know is going to be more and more requested. It's showing up on more and more P3 projects. There is some software to help mitigate it. Durofus is one, but we find that in some cases it's not cutting it. and a lot of it depends on how the model is constructed at the beginning. You know, are the consultants using rooms and areas in the model, or are they not? And if they are, you know, are we able to leverage that in the collection of the COBie data at the end of the day?
Masan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. My question is for Philip. That project that you are required for the COBie, knowing from the fact I'm also living in Calgary, knowing from the fact that the government of Alberta is asking for it, is it because of that or require of the owner?
It's the Calgary Cancer Center, so it is Alberta.
Okay.
As part of that project, yeah.
And Victor?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add on the COBie part. I think like what Philip said, it's exactly what we are seeing as well on our side. We haven't had any COBie projects requirements until like 2 years ago, and we are starting to see more and more owners requesting COBie. So currently we have like 4 projects that are going to be delivering COBie to the client itself. And as you said, Philip, this is it's a new part of BIM that owners are starting to get into it, and we are also learning during the process as well, understanding what the requirements are going to be, especially because COBie is non-necessarily, it changes from which software the owner actually is going to be using for the facility management. It's not like overall data. So we have one project which is from Burnaby, where the client has it's requesting COBie, but at the end, the COBie data doesn't really correlate back to the software they're going to be using. So I think there's still a lot of like learning experience and learning curve in a way of like how we're going to be actually applying all this data during the facility management or the operational and maintenance perspective for the owner as well. And I think we're just going through this process now. We're learning right now.
Yeah, at the end of the day, COBie is simply a glorified spreadsheet. So you really have to know what kind of data you're trying to ingest and where you're trying to get it from, and you're going to have to use software to kind of map it out.
Correct. Yeah.
And the next question is, are trades utilizing Navisworks to ensure the efficiency of the model?
Yes. I mean, I don't know what they mean by efficiency of the model. Is that like the efficiency of the systems of the model or the efficiency of the model geometry? I'm not sure what they mean by that one, but we are using Navisworks to coordinate everything. So it's like the platform of choice.
Yeah.
At least
and Victor?
And then add on for Visto and coordination issues.
I think just adding to that question, Philip, so the trades to start using Navisworks makes a lot of sense because the model is going to be modeled to a certain level which allows a more like realistic approach for the clash detection itself.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned before, during the design phase, actually the consultants itself, we don't actually model to that certain level. What's your take on using Navisworks during the design for mechanical clash detections in that sense?
Well, I think it's always good to have a tool to be able to walk the model and see where potential issues are going to be and identify them. So Navisworks kind of excels at that, and then enhancing it with other tools like Revisto or coordination issues with Procore allows you to actually track things as you go too. So you can assign clashes and errors and issues to be resolved that could be useful in the design level as well, I would think.
Masan, you still have your hand up? No? Okay. And moving to the last question, what are some changes you would like to see happen between owners, architects, contractors? Who wants to go first?
I think I will start. On the architectural side, I think I touched on a little bit when Akira actually asked about how we collaborate between MEP and architectural on those elements, that it's always the blur. I think that part, it's one of the main instances where I see a big fight in a way between MEP and architecture, because a lot of times we are trying to minimize the work and the double work itself and additional work for everyone. And getting to that level, it requires a certain level of collaboration with everyone. And more and more I see the MEP people, when we start using on the tracking issues and those instances, they are one of the first ones to always say, we don't want to use it. I think that's one of the main things, like start embracing, and I think Tim touched on a little bit on previous questions on why the MEP is actually the ones falling behind. And I think on this part, it actually gets on embracing technology and accepting what's out there and start using it.
George, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I don't mind having to go there. I think basically just collaborating, working better together. At the end of the day, we're all in the information industry where we're delivering information across to each consultant, owners passing it to us, and it's going to the contractor. It's just how can we better deliver that information? I feel that a lot of the stuff that we do is we'll do a design quickly, we'll get it all done, and then we just kind of throw it over the fence to the contractor, and then it's on you to sort it out now. And there's tons of RFIs and stuff that come from it. So it's just how do we better process and manage that to deliver the information cleaner and easier and reduce waste and gain more efficiency between each other. And then talking about like the owner's requirements, it's like, what is your actual end goal for this? Like, how do we deliver your goal and idea for this building? And I think a lot of the information we get in there isn't as robust, and we're kind of guessing at it, and it's kind of just a throwing over the fence to us as well. So I think it's just that collaboration and really going through the documents, getting the right workflows and delivering the right information on time, and for each party. Because yeah, it's we've all been there, we're rushing to get deadlines done, and it's just over the fence, forget about it, and then it's someone else to pick up the pieces.
Victor?
Yeah, and I think we start adding as well to the point where sometimes we focus a lot on what the owner asks, but if we start seeing that the advantages of actually start using BIM during the construction, it's more helpful than actually doing everything as it goes on a regular and traditional process. Sometimes it's not only an owner requirement, it's between the consultants and the general contractor on site to actually start using that, not because it's the owner requirement, but it actually improves the efficiency of construction itself.
Philip?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch kind of earlier on what I said kind of at the beginning of all this was, get kind of back propagate the tools or the information that we're going to use in building it, not the fabrication parts or anything, but templates and processes and sizes of things that you default model with on the consultant side and the design side can help tremendously down the road. So getting that information back to the designers saying, hey, stop modeling with generic Revit and start modeling with welded Revit, or the proper sizes of Revit, and use these templates here. We'll give them to you for free to start laying out your bathrooms and your washrooms. And then you're that far ahead of the game when you're actually going into fabrication and construction. And then on the owner side, being able to kind of understand what the owner wants at the end of the day and give them that information throughout the design process, so that you're not just kind of scrambling at the end of the day to fill out a COBE spreadsheet and get the information to the owner. So work with the developer of the software. There's got to be a better way to do things, because I know that when we convert to fabrication parts, we lose all that flow information through the pipe. Is there some way that Autodesk can retain that, through some kind of other information, so that when we get the geometric model at the end of the day, it's not detached from all the engineered data, So there's got to be a better way to do things. So talk to the developer of the software.
All right. Any other panelists have comments on this last question?
Well, I just to reflect, I think the theme throughout, which is about communication And I know that that word is almost as much buzzword as sustainable, green design, BIM, and whatnot. But the communication is the key, and we always lack the time for that. Again, I do believe that we have to focus on why we are, what's the benefit of BIM to during construction, and then later on to operate. That's really why, that's the purpose of it. And that's, I think, from my perspective, that the consultants and contractor, and because it starts with consultants need to focus on that. Really, what's the purpose of it? For the construction, again, to reduce the cost to the owner, because somebody is paying for that, so the owner is paying for that. And then the second part of it, okay, now everything is done. What actually the owner would like it to use for? So what I try to convey is that really that education needs to happen, because people don't know what they don't know, and then they are forced by peers or by the government, if it's Infrastructure Ontario or Infrastructure Alberta, or by the senior leadership who heard something from the contractor on some conference, and they said they will save you $2 million or whatnot, and then they come and ask, it trickles down and say we have to use that. So I think that's really the change that as the owner I would like to see is essentially having some tools that are simple. So I don't have to be like a BIM BIM the actual BIM user, so to speak, or the one who is creating it, to understand, to have like a checklist, like a shopping list. Okay, if I want to use it for this, I have to specify in my RFP that the consultant needs to do this, right? And that's I think the developer of the software, consultant and contractor can help with creating that shopping list, starting from operator or owner, facilities and services. This is what you can use it for. So if you want that, you need to specify this, and manage the expectations up front. And I think, and again, I'm speaking from, this is and it's easier for me to speak. I work in essentially public institution where we constantly share experience and knowledge. And you guys are in the private industries, and this is all competition, right? But I do think that we need to understand, because this is where our industry suffers, especially consultants, is that you do want, in order to play on the same, or to level the field, so that you really feel that you're playing in the fair, you do need to be upfront, and everybody has to invest some time into making that playing field the same level. So that's I think, and to understand that because you are sharing and because you are saying this works and this doesn't work, you are not losing the competitive edge. Because somebody else will figure that out. I think that's some mentality that is holding back progress in this field as well. Because of that knowledge, all I have is knowledge, because that's what consultants have. You have essentially just that knowledge. And if you share that, then somebody, but eventually now with the internet and everything, somebody else will figure that out.
All right, so with that, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions. And we have some of our MEP technical consultants on the line as well. Feel free to have any questions for the panelists. Anybody? Arnie, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I did have a question for, I guess it's more for Philip. And I was just curious, so when you're modeling, I'm just curious, because when we model piping on our end, we tend to just use the out-of-the-box pipe types, the piping materials. And I was just curious if, like, when you take our model, for example, when you redo it on your end, you tend to use your own pipe families, like, or do you actually, sorry, do you use the out-of-the-box families, or do you tend to use families from manufacturers like Victaulic, for example, and when you do your...
We have a database of parts from Fabrication CAD MEP. So if you've ever opened up Revit and you go to MEP systems and you go to, design to fabrication, basically there's some out-of-the-box Revit content that comes with Revit that's basically fabrication parts. It's similar to what we use, but we've spent a lot of time and money developing our fabrication database. So it's got only the parts and pieces that we manufacture and order. So in some cases we do get it from the manufacturer, but it's all in fabrication, ITM content. So you've got RFAs, which are the native Revit families. They're able to house certain information, but they don't allow other data to come across. And then you've got Fabrication CAD MEP, which is, it's got ITM files, and those are based off of pattern numbers. So, a rectangular piece of duct might be pattern 8, for example. And that pattern 8 is also what's on our machine at the plasma table on our coiling sheet metal coil line. So basically we're modeling with the same part that's being sent to the machine. It has all the data on like where the seams are, what the notches are, what the material is, the specification, the labor data in some cases, so how much effort it is to put this piece of pipe together. So it carries more information, and it's more relevant to what we manufacture with.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
But we sometimes use a combination. So equipment and other fittings like that we do purchase can all be RFA content, and they do work together. But anything that we are going to prefab in the shop and actually manufacture in our shop is Fabrication CAD MEP data.
Okay. I was just curious as well for the when you take our model again and do it on your end, do you just tend to focus on the mechanical room, or do you actually end up remodeling the layouts outside the mechanical room, like overall in the building as well?
Depends a lot on how we're going to manufacture. Like if we're going to prefab a lot of racks in the hallways or something like that, we'll remodel everything. In some cases, we'll have sleeving that we have to go through, or shafts that really weren't known during the design portion of the project. So we will reroute things, and we'll also look for ways to optimize. So there's ways to optimize the system, get the same out of the system, and basically save some money here and there, or make it more efficient. Obviously, we're going back and forth. That's in the design build situation. We're going back and forth with the consultant to make sure that they are signing off on that. But yeah, I mean, it depends on how we're going to actually manufacture or install. In some cases, it might be just a bunch of offices or something like that, and we're not really caring too much about where the conduit's going. As long as it goes from the switch to the fixture, that kind of thing. But if it's large duct or large pipe mains, anything 2 inches or above, probably in most cases.
Right. Okay.
And definitely mechanical rooms.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I actually I think another challenge that seems to come up on our end on the consulting side is when we're routing piping. I guess when we're laying out piping, plumbing plans primarily, is I think we're sort of stuck on. We tend to be stuck on the traditional way of showing drawings, like plumbing drawings, which is in a diagrammatic format
Right.
that's easy to be read, easy enough to be read by the plumbing plan checker with the city.
Yeah.
So that tends to be single line, spaced so many inches apart, so it's more readable in the plans.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you've seen any other format that has worked on your end. That, like, for example, I think I remember seeing someone else, maybe another consultant trying to do double line piping, and then color coding the piping so that it's easier to read. But of course, when you do that, you have to print it in color, so that tends to be more expensive. I'm just curious if you've seen any other formats, any other ways of doing.
Not really. We're
yeah.
looking at that. As I mentioned earlier in the discussion, we're looking at trying to blur the line there and see if we can start with a diagram and get it to the point where it's good for the inspectors to see, and but also start to tackle the coordination and modeling side as well. So we can start to get closer to what we're going to fabricate and install. In some cases, for clarity, you may have to fall back on those single line diagrams. In other cases, you might have to supplement it with additional drawings, which then might be a hurdle for the inspector to actually get their mind wrapped around, if they're used to seeing it a certain way. So you don't want to blow their brains either by
exactly,
giving them something that they've never seen before, because then they'll just say, reject it, or give me what I wanted before. So so I think there has to be a dialogue with them. I'm not sure how that happens.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on the floor have any questions? Masan, please unmute.
Yes, unmuting. Another question for Flip. So what we normally training people on Revit and the world of data in SolidCAD is that we are actually doing the utopia in BIM. We are doing all of the calculations, sizing of the pipes, sizing of the ducts, and so on. In the real world, however, we are not actually doing that. We are not putting all of those pipes and pipe segments and connection details into your toilet rooms and plumbing fixtures and so on. How are you sizing the pipes in a real world project, such as your big cancer center? I'm assuming that none of those are, at least piping, are not connected. How are you sizing those and then fabricate and sending them to the fabrications?
Well, that project's a little different. That one is done with RFA content and also using a plugin called Siskiyou in some cases. So we're not using fabrication CAD MEP parts for that particular project. It's old enough that it was done in a different way, but so it is coordinated and collaborated with generic Revit, and then a lot of times those are just being spooled by hand. At this point, we're not using, when I say spooled by hand, they're using Revit to spool them, but there's quite a manual process to spool all the piping segments and get those into prefab. So there's a lot of notation, a lot of drawings that have to occur. With our new platform, we're sizing the pipe based on the engineer, the consultant drawings. So we have to maintain the flows, but in some cases, we might substitute a round piece of duct versus a rectangular just for space considerations or economy. And so there's a lot of there's no one answer to how we're doing it, but it has to follow the design intent, and it also has to follow the specifications for the project. So in our new way of doing things, we're using fabrication parts, but we don't convert it to fabrication parts, or we don't model with fabrication parts until we're to the point where we're getting close to fabricating it. We're still coordinating and moving stuff around. We will, in some cases, just stay with generic Revit and then convert to fabrication parts. Some cases we're routing with fabrication parts, but we're not breaking it up into individual pieces of pipe or ductwork until we're ready to spool it. So it stays kind of relatively easy to manipulate and move around until we get to the point where we're actually, okay, foreman on the site is going to need this in 2 weeks. Let's spool it and get it into the shop and get it out.
Okay.
Then we'll break it up. Yeah.
And then my next question was that, do you remember you told us to get back to Autodesk in terms of the flow information is not available in the piping segment? Can you open that up too? What is that? The flow information that you mentioned?
Yeah, so whenever you convert to fabrication CAD MEP, you lose that information. It's basically just about geometry at that point. So the duct is the pipe is the right size of pipe, the fitting is the right size fitting, but there's no connectivity information. Like you don't know the CFMs on a piece of pipe or duct, or you know, you don't know the airflow after that point.
After spooling, you mean? Okay.
Well, after you convert it to fabrication data, because at that point, once you convert it to fabrication parts, you just have data on the geometry itself. You know, how much does that piece of pipe weigh? How big is it? What's the inside diameter, the outside diameter, and how much does it cost to install it? It doesn't care what's going through it at that point.
Gotcha.
And how much is going through it. You know, it's to spec, so it is the right pipe. It's like a virtual or digital twin, if you will, to throw that word out there, but it is a digital twin of what's going to be installed in the field. But, you know, who's to say you can't just run water through something that you're going to put glycol through? You know, it doesn't know that at that point.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Masan. Anyone else? Last chance. Oh, Arnie.
Sorry, I do have maybe one question for Jelena. Sorry, I apologize for Helene.
Owner, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Jelena.
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 Jelena. I was just yeah, I apologize if it seems like I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm just curious if and I can't remember if you mentioned this earlier, if you did have a like a sort of a document on your end that that maybe you've been developing or has been developed on what you expect on like what to see in the model for sorry, I guess for Revit standards, any kind of I guess the reason I'm asking the question is we in the beginning of the project we tend to develop our own BIM execution plan that highlights the standards that we need to follow when we do our modeling, and you know, it could be I mean, it tends to be more like just standards that we need to follow to coordinate amongst ourselves, like what work sets to use and file names, formats, what versions of Revit to use, and you know. But I was just curious if you had something on your end that you've been developing, and which I think is something that, you know, we could use when we do our own execution plan as well. Anyway, or if I guess maybe that also leads to whether or not you're currently taking Revit models on your end and utilizing them in a way that I guess you know, that works for you on the what is it, on the building, sorry, in terms of the facilities management end.
Management side.
Yeah.
So as I said, you know, we are. I can tell we can say we are still learning, because we are going with that. Yes, we want to have everything to be done in Revit, but then when the question comes, okay, so how are you going to use it? We are absolutely still learning and working on that. I don't have handy here, but I know that we have come up with some kind of blurb what actually we expect from Revit, so that when we go out with the RFP for consultants, we have that, and we have worked with one of our consultants to help us with the verbiage that is actually that makes sense, so that we don't just say BIM, or Revit, but to put a little bit more detail. And then I know that on one of the recent projects, we got a question, what a level of LOD you want, and I think we issued that in addendum as LOD 300, but don't quote me. I do think, and I hope that there will be some follow-up discussion after this gathering, I would say, that we can, that there can be some document developed that starts with the owner requirements, maybe contractor requirements, and then what because it all starts with the consultant team, what consultant team needs to do, and then also what AutoCAD or Autodesk, sorry, or as I think Philip mentioned, what the software developer can help or maybe has to do that doesn't exist now to actually help meet the contractor needs, owner's needs. So I don't know if I answered, Arnie, if I answered your question fully.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and Arnie, just adding a little bit from past experiences on lots of owners with BIM requirements. Most of the time when they have and they have developed their own standards itself, they actually provide us with the document on saying this is what you have to use. So if they have any specific naming nomenclature that they want us to use, like work sets naming or file naming, all those parts, usually they provide those documents to us when we start getting to the process of the implementation of the project itself. And that way, just as our own experience as an architect, a lot of times we are the ones developing the execution plans, and we just carried over those informations into the project execution plan itself. And sometimes we just refer back to those owner requirements. But in general, when they do have specific requirements, they provide that information during the pursuit or with the RFP document.
Michael?
It's funny, Arnie, you mentioned BIM execution plans. Literally today at 11:30, I had a meeting with a very well-known piece of software out there that people are using called Plannerly. Digital BIM execution plans. And what's interesting with their product is that even though a lot of firms have developed these BIM execution plans, they're usually Word documents. And what Plannerly does is it allows you to better track if people are following what's outlined in those plans. So that's something we're looking into right now, because we know a number of our clients already have it. It's something that we're looking to offer as well. It's either something that you would buy directly from us, or if we are helping a client implement Revit and they are wanting to create BIM execution plans, we probably point them towards this than starting off in a Word document, which is a bit of a static kind of document. So
okay, great.
It's a growing need. So I'm glad you brought that topic up.
Yeah. Okay. Great. What was that called? Planner, right?
Plannerly. Plannerly. Plannerly.
Plannerly. Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right. I typed that into the chat box, Arnie.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
Hi guys.
So,
I have
Philip?
to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got to go to another meeting, but thank you for having me on the panel, and it was a great discussion.
Yeah, we're actually just about to wrap this up.
Yep.
Yep. So
Thank you,
thank you all the panelists. Appreciate it. Like we've recorded this. We'll follow up with some of you afterwards as well if you have any further questions, and we'll keep you all in mind when we schedule this again, probably in the next 2 to 3 months.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank
all
you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks very much.